Secure your Elixir apps with Paraxial.io. From code analysis and bot defense to dependency checks, they've got you covered. Elixir first design with GitHub integration. Elevate your security at Paraxial.io. Testing. What's up? I'm Jacob Blitzo, your Elixir mentor, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Elixir Mentor podcast. This is where we discuss everything related to Elixir, from interviews with enthusiasts, pioneers in the community, to innovative projects and libraries shaping Elixir's future. I'm welcoming back Greg Medland, and he's a recruiter who specializes in connecting talented developers with companies seeking expertise in the Elixir ecosystem. Welcome back, Greg. It's exciting to have you back on. I feel like you're a popular guest and people always love to hear from you. So I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Jacob. Yeah, I got a few people from the last one who didn't realize, put two and two together, I think, after we jumped on a call and were like, yeah, I recognize the voice. It's the Yorkshire accent's traveling far and wide.
That's awesome. I love that. So I feel like the last time we talked, I could look it up to know exactly, but I feel like it's got to be at least a year. And I feel like overall, a lot has changed.
Yeah, I think a lot has. We were really, I guess, in the midst of a full year of kind of the first impacts of kind of the AI side of things, the kind of post-COVID boom, followed by post-COVID boom, going bust, for want of a better word, in the tech market. And so, yeah, the last year's been interesting for sure. I think a lot has changed. There are still a few trends that remain true, I think, from that time when we last spoke. Yeah, but I think there's a little bit more cause for optimism, to be honest.
Yeah, sorry, I had to turn off my AC. It was just hitting my mic. I saw the line just gone. So, what would you say is the current state of affairs in the Elixir job world? Are you still seeing an uptick, or is it leveling off? Is it diminishing? Is your job getting really hard?
Yeah, job's never easy. Well, I'm dealing with people all day, so that's never easy. But I think the overall trend of the last year has been getting better. I think that's in general tech, software engineering, recruitment. It was pretty much at its low point probably earlier last year, and I think there's two different aspects to it. There's kind of tech hiring in general and kind of the the VC market, those kind of things, which is from where I'm sitting has improved quite a lot in that past year, particularly in certain sectors. And then more specifically with Elixir, I think it's what I say to people a lot is, if there's a downturn in the market, if you're in a smaller market than JavaScript, right, then you're gonna feel it more, because it's gonna feel like there's no one hiring in Elixir. But I think the thing that I've noticed is the adoption has continued to be strong. I'm still seeing new companies regularly, who I've never heard of in the past 5 years of doing this, using Elixir or migrating to Elixir, or starting new projects up in Elixir, which is always given me that kind of, that's always the exciting thing. I think the most exciting thing for me is that when you see a new name pop up in the space, and it's really interesting. So adoption wise, it's very difficult to say, but I think from where I'm sitting, I feel kind of positive about that, for sure. And you throw in the Apple using Elixir, with a kind of in public, basically, and they don't like to publicize those kind of things, I don't think. And a few other kind of major companies using Elixir. I saw the BBC back in the UK, and the talk there, which is those are all really promising signs. But we're not in the kind of glory days of kind of recruiting in general. We're still quite far from that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like tech in general is getting a little hammered, right? At least the job end of things.
Yeah, I think so. I think the post COVID situation was kind of unlike any other situation, and the demand was just so high. So I think like in that period it kind of warped what the perception was, um, and
And
I
then when
think
we level things back, it feels painful to us, but it's more of
well
a correction, you know?
I think there wasn't a leveling; it was just a hard correction, and it was like very hard, like a very brutal scenario. But I think like now we're getting closer back to like an equilibrium that kind of makes sense and has some kind of order to it, rather than you know a situation where very talented, experienced folks are not getting interviews. I don't see that so much anymore. I'm seeing, particularly at the senior end of the market, multiple options and multiple like offers kind of at the end of a process. So those kind of things bode well.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear for sure. We have Mike P said that it's in general it's still hard to land your first gig. Well, and
Yeah,
honestly, I think that's true in almost any market, right? If it's if
yeah,
it's your first gig, it's usually the hardest.
and it's also true in like most industries and most kind of sectors. It's just that
Hmm.
first foot in the door is always the hardest. It's kind of what you get told when you're in college, right? And what you get told or whatever route you take is the first step. Just getting in is the tricky bit.
Yeah. I remember like it's 10 years ago now, but my first gig, I basically, I found a really small startup that was like very public with what they were doing. I got my foot in the door, got like started doing free work for them, and that's how I got my first job.
Yeah, yeah, and like in anything, like I always look back on anyone's first job. If you ask most people, it's a similar story. It wasn't a per se on paper great job. Like it was kind of rough it until you kind of get the
Yeah.
experience. It's a trade off, right? And I think similarly, like um, during like post COVID, it was very easy because demand was so high to come out of boot camp or come out of college and have multiple offers. So that kind of I think warped perceptions a little bit, and it's kind of there's been kind of an adjustment period back to all like levels of seniority.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the market. That's why I like talking to you because I'm always like I feel like I'm more quick to go like doom and gloom and
Yeah,
like I feel bad for like juniors in today's market, and I don't know if I am just not seeing like positive aspects of it, but I just like I look at what I've seen and I just see a lot of companies wanting senior developers, and
yeah,
now they're leveraging. We'll get more into the AI, but you're starting to leverage AI tools to make a senior more productive
yeah.
versus like using AI tools to help a junior become a better developer.
Yeah, yeah, and not to play into kind of any kind of doom and gloom, but like there is a perfect storm of you've got the advent of the massive kind of adoption of AI tools. Then you've got the fact that companies can hire remotely across the world so easily. That's going to drive salaries down to a certain extent in the US, and yeah, you kind of throw that all in with the kind of general economic and political uncertainties. Like last year was a pretty hot mess,
Yeah.
um but like I say, like I do probably tend to look on the kind of more optimistic side, and I'm still
Well, you
yeah
have to be, or you couldn't do what you're
yeah,
doing.
exactly. I might as well give up. I might as well give up right
uh,
now if not. But I mean, the I would say that for I have seen like the junior folk like get hit probably hardest, and kind of the junior to mid a couple of years out of college, it can be more difficult at the moment. Um, and yeah, I guess my advice, like, I don't know if I'm really in a position to give advice at that level. Most of the kind of hiring I do tends to be at the senior kind of principal end if people are wanting to work with me. However, I'll always kind of speak to kind of junior mid-level engineers who are, passionate about Elixir. I think some of the time it can be a good idea to kind of go and work with another language, but pursue Elixir kind of in your hobby time. If there's going to be more options, it might not be ideal for a couple of years, but at the end, it's engineering experience. And if you're working on stuff
Yeah.
in your free time and you're engaging with the community still, that puts you at a more advantageous position when the roles do open up.
It is true. And you're still going to learn skills that
Yeah.
cross over. Like you're learning how to work on teams, you're learning how to work with databases, how to architect things and like
Yeah.
build in general. So it's all transferable knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. And just knowing the kind of the pitfalls, the trade-offs, the long-term impacts that kind of technical decisions make, or why things are done a certain way. I think they're quite, they go across kind of engineering, and they're language agnostic to a certain extent. And if anything, it might kind of ignite your passion for Elixir even more, which sometimes tends to be the case.
Hey guys, I did my own Elixir stuff for like 3 or 4 years, I feel like, before I actually took on a role somewhere else. Because I loved Elixir, so I was just building my own products.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like I will say that the Elixir community, like in general, like I rarely ever speak to a hiring manager. Look, they're always going to prefer like a really good tech stack alignment, like and particularly in production. But a senior engineer kind of transitioning to the language, if they've got good projects that they can share, it does, like it eliminates a lot of the kind of worries, and I do think like as a community, the Elixir community is pretty good at helping people adopt, and partly thanks to you. And
I was just gonna say I know a guy. No.
yeah. And but I think like it's that what I see with hiring managers is like that they're confident, particularly if they've ramped up in Elixir. For a lot of people, it wasn't their first language, right? And they're very confident in their abilities to ramp someone up quite quickly in Elixir. So yeah.
Paulie, so we have a good question from Paulie. He says it's still somewhat difficult across the board, especially with 6 to 8 rounds per interview. Yeah, we gotta stop leak code interviews and the never ending interview process.
I think the when it comes to interviews, like being a company should just be very transparent, I think, up front with kind of what the process looks like. When I'm taking a brief on a search for a client, and they'll tell me, this is the process, and what kind of happens next. Like I'll definitely always advise. Like I would say the average for me is probably three steps. There's usually a quick chat with a hiring manager, 30 minutes to an hour. Technical portion, whether that's a take home, live coding with one of the engineers, or kind of working through a technical kind of problem or conversational. And then a final kind of cultural check is usually like appropriate. But yeah,
those are the best ones. Like the 3 and done, like even like, you have your first one just to make sure you even align at all. And then like, I'm fine with like a technical one after that, and then followed with the take home.
Yeah.
Cause like, the take home, it's a couple hours of your time, but I'd much rather do that than like on the spot leak code problem solving.
Yeah. And that's completely fair. And I think as long as it's also like the way I see it sometimes is, I can tell a client like this probably isn't the best way to, but for their culture, their environment, it might actually be the best way to see if it's, if you're a fit. And, if that's the case and you feel like it doesn't go well, it's probably not the place you're going to be happy, like long term,
What is that overlay app that just like a guy created, like a leak code cheat app? Well, I forgot what it's called, but it's like,
I saw that. I to tell you what as well, I have had a few occasions where hiring managers have said to me, the answers are like too rehearsed or too like textbook. When you're having a technical conversation, I think
you got to stumble a little bit,
Yeah, it's that thing. You kind of want to have like see someone's brain working as opposed to someone, just reading off a you're reciting kind of something, which is hard because it's like you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Because
Dude, I lock up and I feel like I'm just like a complete idiot, but maybe
yeah,
not.
it's no fun. But I really do think, like, I asked quite recently, I asked five engineering managers from different Elixir companies, and this is going from like 5-person teams to like 500-person team. Well, maybe not 500, but big teams. So there's a bit of variation there, and more common than not, it was they were saying, what do you find hard basically to find when you're hiring? And it wasn't, a particular skill or a particular framework, or that wasn't kind of the main thing that across everyone. It was, how do people reason through problems? How do they kind of make those trade-offs? And like, these are almost intangible, right? They're not assessed in like elite code
Hmm.
kind of challenge at all. It's how to translate that as best as you can, right? With up front, which makes me sad. But I found that really interesting because it doesn't help people with their CVs, because you get told to list every keyword on your CV, and it might
Right.
get you in the door. But then I think from there, it's really, I guess, showing how you approach problems is much more important.
Well, now too, with like resumes, you have to hit those keywords because companies are scanning them all with AI, and you're not even going to
Yeah.
make the cut if you don't hit the right words.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like for instance, myself, like, rarely post the roles actually as a job on LinkedIn, because there's a load of kind of AI generated resumes that kind of come through, and it's just, I'm not going to find the real people within there, to be
Mm.
honest.
I didn't even think about that. You have fake applications
Oh,
coming through
oh
too.
my, oh my goodness, so many, and yeah, so many not who they say they are. There might be a person there, but they're not who they say they are, and it's kind of, um, it's difficult for companies, and yeah, there's we've almost got too advanced when it comes to hiring. That's why, yeah, we've got to keep it old school. Get on the phone to people, get getting people's faces, get networking. They're always kind of my go-to tips.
I'm actually like curious when you announce, like I follow you on, like X and LinkedIn. When you announce a role, what kind of rush do you see into your inbox? Are you like just
Yeah,
tons?
it depends. I mean, like, so my LinkedIn and my Twitter are, I make quite specific for Elixir, and I kind of, that's who I want to hit. I do get a lot of kind of um random messages. Usually the problem is, and it's not really a problem, it's that they're based elsewhere in the world when my roles are mainly US, which, I kind of explain that really, for most of the time. But I wouldn't say I get like a ton of, on my mailing list, I'll get quite a bit of interest, but I think it's, they're all people I've spoken to. They're all people who've kind of, I've had a conversation with, so that it doesn't cause too much of a headache. I will say in the past kind of year, it has got difficult to manage as one person to kind of get back to everyone promptly. So apologies, everyone. I'll say it now. If I've missed an email or something like that has happened. And, for the previous few years, that wasn't happening. Like, I was able to keep on top of it um, pretty comfortably. Um, but yeah, if you post on a traditional format, like a job on LinkedIn, 1% is going to be people who are relevant and, yeah,
Yeah, that's
and
wild.
genuine. Um,
I mean, I
it, but
guess it's good that you're getting that many like mailing list responses or just email replies.
yeah, it is.
Or does that mean it's like an offset balance where you don't have enough jobs for how many people are looking?
It's it's difficult. I think, like, with the market tightening, like, and I feel like there's a couple of trends that are obviously, um, I think I did kind of mention last time, when it comes to like hybrid work and, that kind of thing, which is a big switch up from the past kind of 4 years before then. So, and then also, like, companies are asking for, uh, maybe a higher amount of experience than in previous years. So my bar's still kind of being raised, and kind of, the searches are a little more specific. So, but as opposed to 3 years ago, anyone with any production Elixir experience they're gonna try and hire because there just there wasn't anyone on the market.
Yeah. I'm curious when like you say you are more replacing like senior level engineers. Is there like an easy way to break that down? Like what you consider a senior level, like for people that are looking, if they're like, well, I'm like above junior, I'm probably like intermediate somewhere, but I don't know what that means as far as like trying to get a more senior level position.
I think, yeah, I might get in trouble for what I say, I guess, but I think a senior to me is a very crude level. Let's say 3 to 4 years working with Elixir in production at scale, with a number of years prior to that working potentially with other languages. Yeah, at a decent scale. I think when clients say senior, reading between the lines a lot of the time, that means quite autonomous. Can kind of see a problem and run with it. Can help out maybe some of the more junior folks on the team, and do that from almost day one. So like, there's not like a prolonged ramp up period where someone else is kind of monitoring them. I think it's autonomy and kind of like obviously within a team, but being able to just go at it pretty fast.
Hit the ground running, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I don't like to say like number of years, and to be honest, clients rarely say kind of number of years.
I
But
think numbers of years is silly because everyone is learning and they have different experiences at different times, right? Like,
yeah,
I've been like a developer for 10 years, but it like my 10 years looks a lot different than someone else's 10 years.
yeah, and I think to the same point, if you're, say, 20, 25 person kind of startup at Series A, or around that kind of level, and an engineer comes who's been in a team that was bigger than the whole company, and they were a senior there, their idea of a senior might be very different. They've handled more things at scale. The other team move a lot quicker. Like, there's a lot of
Yeah.
nuance to it, and being a senior in one position and being a senior in another is two different things. So that's kind of important, and I find that comes up quite regularly.
Yeah, it's a hard definition to place on something, but I feel like over and over, especially with the way like things are trending, you see just senior level positions. So I feel like it's kind of important to kind of know what that means.
Yeah, at least what you're aiming for, right? I think that's
Yeah. So going down like trends that you're seeing in like the Elixir space, what are you seeing that companies want more these days? Like beyond just like Elixir Phoenix, what are they asking for? Like, is live view becoming more of a requirement on Elixir roles, or is it still more just heavy backend focus?
Yeah. So I think I kind of got three. I think like one trend, Ash framework has like come up a number of
Ash,
times.
oh, that's cool to hear.
Yeah, with Zach. So that's really really good, and I've seen that more and more. It was kind of funny because it was kind of similar to like live view 3 years ago, was like started popping up, and then it became very kind of mainstream within the Elixir ecosystem. Having said that, there's a lot of companies with Elixir Phoenix backend, React on the front end, who want people who are able to kind of be equally adept at both sides, and that's quite rare within the community, I would say. I tend to find that super strong Elixir engineers go down the live view route naturally, and kind of steer away from kind of JS frameworks. But that's still kind of a hot commodity because there's a lot of companies with legacy systems that are React and Elixir. So if you're able to contribute on both sides, that's a big plus. And then I think the big one is obviously AI, and kind of having any any kind of experience with machine learning or any open source stuff in the Elixir community with AI. I don't know if Mark Erickson's been on the podcast before, but
He hasn't. I've harassed him. I've tried. Like, so he lives relatively close to me, so I've ran into him at like an Elixir meetup, and
nice.
I'm trying.
Yeah, well, I'll ping him
One
as
of
well.
Yeah,
I don't know
one
if
of these days.
yeah,
Well, because
but I
he's
mean,
doing a lot of cool stuff with LLMs and stuff, and he's working on an app. I won't talk about it. I don't know what is all public there, but he's doing a lot of cool stuff with the
yeah,
like LLM world and AI. So
yeah, and there are a fair few companies that I'm seeing who would be kind of very excited about that. I think with trying to build up the Elixir's kind of AI capabilities with kind of Python, and it's there's a big bridge, a big gap to bridge over there, and I think people that are doing that are definitely in demand. And I think there's certain sectors as well, like industries that I feel like are stronger. Aside from those three, so yeah, I mean, full stack is always going to be, I think, advantageous, particularly when times are tighter. Budgets are tighter. They want their engineers to do, I think, they want to do more with less, basically, and that's their prerogative. And I think,
I think it's really hard to be a good full stack engineer, especially when it's like it's easy if you're like staying in like live view and like the
yeah,
Elixir space, right?
yeah,
But it gets very difficult. Like React and like JS frameworks, they change so often. It's
yeah,
hard to stay an expert if you're not in it every single day.
yeah. I really honestly do feel like it can be the hardest roles to fill for me because, like you say, someone who's passionate about Elixir, very strong in Elixir, it's difficult to keep track of what's going on in Elixir as well, and
Hmm.
look into all the areas of Elixir in 6 months, a year. It's kind of, there's a lot of change, and I think, I'm sure it's the same in the React world. And then, if you haven't,
Well, the React and like JS, all those frameworks, and it's just on steroids compared
yeah,
to Elixir. I
yeah,
have a hard time staying up to date in just what I work on, and that's Elixir.
yeah,
And yeah, I'm gonna tell you my cheat code: start a podcast and have people tell you about things just live, and
yeah,
you're forced to learn.
yeah, exactly. You get a brain dump on a Friday afternoon, and
Exactly.
yeah. Nice. But yeah, they're the three things. I was really pleased to see kind of Ash framework really take off, and I think there's obviously quite a bit of. I think there's a number of kind of case studies now of companies that have done really well with it. So I expect that to kind of trend to continue. Yeah.
Yeah, people just got to see the light. Mike P says the running joke is that each day a new JS framework is born. That it's probably true.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, I've been doing tech recruiting for quite a few years now, and like I see something.js, I'm like, that's a joke, surely. Like,
Owen says can confirm start a podcast. Exactly. um, Now, one thing. So like, okay, Mike has another good point. He said that he sees a lot of clients, they ask for React on the front end just because it's popular. And I feel like that is a negative trend you always see is everyone picks the popular stacks because everyone else is using them.
mm,
And it makes the Elixir adoption a little more difficult, which I just had Brian Cardarella on talking about adoption and like, all the difficulties that Elixir faces to, be implemented by companies. And
yeah.
I don't think anyone knows the answer.
No, and I think yeah, you got to think if you've got a team and half of them are kind of React.js or JavaScript kind of specialists, half of them are Elixir specialists. At some point, they're going to probably the JavaScript folks are going to outweigh them, and it's going to, if there's ever a change, it's going to be that way. So I think like what podcasts like this, and I think like the conferences obviously are great to kind of showcase. There's a use case for Elixir, with live view, for example, in a number of industries been used to great success now. And I think it's publicizing that is the tricky bit, and kind of getting that out there is always going to be a challenge.
Yeah. Um, when you start seeing, I know, like, all right, I think like let's dive into the AI impact in development roles. You like, so you always hear the super scary news, right? When like FANG companies are like Microsoft laying off thousands, right? Or GitHub claiming that 30% of code is now AI generated. And you're hearing all these like crazy statistics, right? Where do you see like job security for Elixir developers as this, like, obviously, like if 30% is a real number, is this going to continue to grow? Are we going to just see it plateau and trash code is going to enter and then security risks are going to open up? Like, I don't think any of us really know, but I think like, let's assume it's going to grow and be better and better, right?
Hmm.
But where do you think the demand goes with that? Do you think it just kind of folds into our tool set as developers?
I think, yeah, I think my perception right now, and look, I'm not an engineer, so I can't kind of talk from that perspective, but I think, like, that there are benefits to kind of coding with AI for sure, and particularly as it gets kind of better and better, as you say. But I think it's almost even more important to have someone who knows what they're doing, steering the ship with it. And I think, again, it's probably going to push back into that trend of the senior folks are going to be the ones we're going to kind of run out of junior folks. Because rather than them making mistakes and learning from it, it's going to be AI learning from mistakes and learning from it. So that's worrying for sure. I think that's like a scary thought. I mean, I'm in recruitment. I don't spend a whole bunch of time thinking about how AI is going to replace me. I've yet to see a kind of a tool that will do it. So I definitely try and keep fairly away from that news. And I also, like, I can see its limitations in what I do. I get like
Mm-hmm.
AI meeting notes from my calls, and it kind of summarizes, and it gets someone's salary wrong. It gets, it interprets something completely wrong. And if that would be a deal breaker later down the line, like, these are simple things. So if I'm not that worried, I really don't think engineers should be super worried right now. But I think they should be curious about it, experiment with it themselves, and kind of see how they can use it to improve productivity if they can. If not, then there's definitely no need to worry. But I think, like, a lot of companies are definitely looking for people who are like open to working with AI tools, and that's a common trend.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, what are you seeing, like, on the employer side? How are they responding? Like, do they want developers that know how to include them into their tool set? And like,
Yeah.
how do they respond to them being used in the interview process and things like that?
Yeah, so that's funny, because we had like a year of everyone complaining that developers were using AI for interviews, and then we had a year of people interviewing and the interviewers saying they're not using AI enough. So it's we've kind of gone full circle.
Yeah.
Um, but I think like what I see is that it varies company to company, but it's the first time in the last 2 years where I've heard, in their current work, they don't really use AI tools that much. We do every day. That would be an area for someone to improve upon. That's fairly common, and that's the way they do things at their company, and that's kind of their prerogative. So it's finding the right balance. But if you're looking at the whole market, you're trying to make yourself as desirable as possible, it's definitely worth familiarizing yourselves with those tools. Yeah.
I find it interesting. Like the last couple months, I've noticed a huge like uptick in developers more embracing the tools and discussing it and discussing
Mm,
their workflows, which I like to see. And like at Collex, we're very open with how we use AI and how we're
mm,
implementing tools, because like it's just like a productive increase right now, right? It helps us write tests faster. It helps us like refactor. It helps us do a lot of things. And like whenever someone gets a little like new tip or trick, we're more openly discussing it versus like, it's not the
Yeah.
black sheep in the room anymore.
Yeah, I think like the worst thing to do is to kind of bury your head in the sand and kind of pretend it's not gonna have an impact. It's
Yeah.
already having a significant impact. How does it impact you is kind of worth exploring, I think, for everyone. And you probably, like I say, it'll probably be a reassuring exercise because you realize what it can't do and what it can do. And the things that it can do allows you to focus more of your time on other things that it's not ready for, and that's really where your value is going to be in the next few years. So I think it's good to be doing that daily.
Yeah. My like biggest eye opener was it? I think it was last weekend or the weekend before, but I had Andrew Stewart and Daniel Bergholtz on, and we completely vibe coded with Claude Code and Tidewave. And like, granted, it was a small project and we started it from scratch, so like it's a lot easier to use AI to create a full project. But we created a polling app and it worked really well, and it was like the first time I was like really impressed with like Claude Code specifically. It was like the
Mm,
best. Like I stopped using Cursor because it was so good,
mm.
and it was a lot of fun. And tomorrow I'm doing some kind of vibe coding, and we'll see. It'll be a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah. It's definitely interesting, and I'm kind of like, I feel like no one really knows like how it's going to pan out until we're like a year
No,
in, and then like
I
we'll
know. We're just like like removing our jobs using it so much. I will say though, I don't like, I couldn't just full blown vibe code. Like if you're not reviewing the code and reading it and telling it when it's wrong, I don't think
mm,
you'd be able to make a very good product.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think um yeah, I think that it's particularly when you're, I mean, again, I'm like thinking as if I was an engineer, and I'm not, so I'm probably not kind of the best person to comment on its productivity. But the companies who are using it, I think are finding. I think there's probably companies that are like super early stage, for example, they're going for next round of funding, that kind of thing. They got to move quick, like chasing runway and that kind of thing. They got to move very fast, and I think in those cases, like there's a case to be made for do you have to use AI to get to where you need to get to in this amount of time? Like maybe because it costs too much to hire another person. You can't do that right now. And it's
Maybe. Yeah. Like Mike and Owen are bringing up good points. I think like tech debt is going to hit us at
yeah,
some point because I
yeah,
think a lot of crappy code is sneaking into code bases.
yeah.
And if you're not careful, like that's what I'm saying, like you have to be reviewing everything it puts in. You can't just blindly press, you know, take the wheel,
Yeah,
because I agree. So Owen's like, I expect a wave of human rewrites in a year or two, and that's probably pretty probable. Like,
yeah, yeah.
because if
The
you're not
cleanup.
careful, yeah, it's gonna be nasty. I'll say there's a balance, right? And there is part of me like, if I use it too much, like instead of just writing out a function and like thinking through a problem, I kind of start feeling a little like brain dead.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
like you're not actually solving problems or using any cognitive ability in your brain. And that scares me because
yeah.
like, do you just stop thinking how to solve problems and only like look at a problem being solved and knowing that it's a good solution?
And then the problem is if you then get to a problem that it can't solve and you have to jump back in, your brain is nowhere near that problem. So it's like
Yeah.
that's where I think the difficulty lies. And you're probably quite right. I feel like yeah, that's not. I mean, I guess it's good for the market, but it's there'll be a lot of people going to do cleanup operations for months on end.
I also think it could be a trap
Mm,
because like right now, where's all the VC money?
mm,
It's
yeah,
in AI, right?
yeah,
So like all these companies, they're probably not making money, right? And they're getting us at like, $20 to $100 a month on their services. What happens when VC money runs out and they have to be profitable? Do we now have $500 to $1,000 in subscriptions or tokens that we have to pay for to continue the workflow we're now used to because we can no longer think?
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a lot of, you're right, and like, is it almost a self-fulfilling prophecy as well? There's kind of concerns about that, I'm sure, but I think for the next kind of year or so, we kind of got to just see how it plays out. I'm not sure any of us really know how the impact it's going to have, but I think, as I see it right now, humans are still, in demand and a necessary part of a business. We're not there
For
yet.
sure. Owen said an AI rubber duck would be interesting if it generates questions instead of answers. So, I actually use AI prompting more often than not than when writing code to rubber duck off of it. Cause I think that's good because we're all remote. So you're not talking to people next to you anymore. But if you talk about a problem with AI and give it a solution and actually tell it you want a rubber duck, it's pretty good, honestly.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, it's honestly, it does blow me away a little bit how good it can be, but there's also elements of it that it's kind of like, I think people appreciate very strong engineers almost more because of it, to a certain extent as well. The engineers that are working through problems themselves. So it's interesting. It'll be a fun year anyway.
I don't know. I think it's a trap. It's we're forgetting how to think because we rely on our tool set too much.
Yeah, and it's easy. It's easy to do, even myself, with like I say, with AI note takers and stuff, and you forget. I think one of the I use it like ChatGPT, for a bit of help. And there's actually an Elixir company who have a ChatGPT competitor that's written on Elixir, but
Oh, nice.
I use pretty regularly. Yeah.
Well,
And
do you know the name? Throw it out there.
yeah,
We gotta.
it's called iAsk.ai,
Okay.
and it's pretty. I find it a little bit more humanistic. So it's pretty useful. But again, you forget, my most valuable point a lot of the time is that I'm a human being. I'm dealing with human beings, and I put my own spin on things, and any kind of AI tool is not going to be able to do
All right.
that
If
as well.
anyone knows anyone at iAsk, hook me up with their info. I need to have a new guest on.
I know the CTO. I'll drop you his details. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, that would be awesome. But yeah, I don't know. AI is I think it's really, really cool. And obviously I don't think it thinks. I think it's just a really good search algorithm and it puts things together quickly, right? But the second it starts thinking, I don't know.
Yeah. And what about when it kind of with it talking about with search, where adverts will start coming up, and you get that, and then what happens if it's writing software and it's creating software that then feeds into you needing to pay for.
Dude, it's a trap, man. I'm telling you. I was just talking to a buddy. He doesn't work in tech, but he works in construction, and he was just telling me that he stopped using AI to write emails because he was forgetting how to write well.
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah.
I was just he hated how dependent he was. And you had to proofread and rewrite AI generated emails anyways, because they always throw in insights and random words that you don't actually use when you're writing.
Yeah.
And it drives me insane.
Yeah, exactly. If all my emails were AI written, then it's well, what am I adding to this process at this point?
Oh, Andrew Stewart has a question. You kind of touched on this, but we can revisit it. He was interested in your perspective on the job market, if it's started to recover from the downturn of the post-COVID recovery.
Yeah. I think in general, it's definitely improving. That's through friends and network across tech in general, and engineering. So, and I think like there was obviously other factors. Like last year, you had the election, you had other like things that were known to cause downturns in hiring. So it was kind of a perfect concoction really over the past 2 years. So yes, like right now, I'm seeing more and more demand. I think the demand that is there is still pretty specifically at the top end of the market, and pretty specific. Companies can afford to be pretty picky at the moment still, unfortunately, but or fortunately, whichever way you look at it. But yeah, I think like general consensus, like I'm feeling way more positive than probably the last time we spoke.
Yeah, well, that's good. It's good to hear. I need to add a button to like have like a cheer or something and like
Yeah, yeah. Or
clapping go on
confession
the screen.
cannons. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think it'd be good. I want to just circle back to our AI topic a little bit. And I know we kind of talked about this, but are employers starting to recommend that people have like AI tools that they know how to use under their belt? Like, has that been a requirement yet? Like, how to integrate, like, say, like Claude Code or Tidewave into your Phoenix apps? Like, are those coming up or not really?
No, not like not exactly. I think like I've had some kind of take home tests where people are encouraged to use those tools, like and that's um because that's how they work, or they're allowed to work like with them. And so um I just haven't had people, like, it's not been never been a strict requirement. I think it's been like, are they open to working with kind of AI tools or tooling? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was interviewing, they I can't remember what it was. It was something with like an ETS table, and I generated like basically I manually generated a query, and I didn't use like an Erlang function properly. And I remember like in the interview they're like, "How did you create this?" And I was like, "Well, I needed the query, so I asked Claude to write me the query." And like if I would have lied at that point, they would have known. And I think it was
Yeah, yeah,
better.
yeah.
It was way better to admit I used like a tool to
Yeah,
create something that like shouldn't just like be written out all perfectly. And
yeah.
so yeah, you got to just embrace where you use it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if it gets you there correctly, then there's not too much to worry about. But no, I definitely like it. It's funny. Like I think it's more of like an open mindedness with it. If a team are existing and they're big on using it day to day, then you're not going to be that happy. You're going to be in arguments all day saying that's not how to you should be engineering. So I think it's
Yeah.
more of a cultural thing than it is a
Have you ran
technical.
into any weird sticklers that are so anti AI they don't want anything to do with it in like
Mm,
hiring process and engineer use?
oh, that's a good question. Um, no, no, I've no. I think most people are probably, the average is probably leaning towards AI being okay in
I
some
think it's being
situations.
seen as a price saver, like price savings, right? Or like productivity increase, right?
I think so. I think
Yeah.
like everyone's leaner right now,
Hmm.
than they have been before. So the more you can do with less people, and then it's, as you said, in the next few years, the costs of other things might actually end up eclipsing what another senior salary would be, right?
Yeah.
We're probably not too far away from that point. But yeah, I think people see it as like a productivity gain, and yeah.
Yeah. Andrew said he stopped writing most SQL queries by hand. I mean, yeah. I mean, a lot of like if they're super basic, I'll write them by hand. And like honestly, I'm only writing SQL queries by hand if I'm like looking for specific data or making sure like, an ecto
Yeah.
query is working as expected, but it's very rare.
Okay, well, people, fresh from college, get on your SQL queries, and and you'll have some clear up operations in a year or so, maybe. But
Yeah, there you
um,
go.
yeah,
All right, let's see. Um, I don't really like any of these questions right now. Let's go like all right, let's go into like practical advice that you can give Elixir developers to like how do you see Elixir developers like focus on to like remain valuable with like AI assisted development? Like, how is a developer staying relevant, and how do they focus on their skills still as an engineer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I'm probably. So we're talking, yeah, in the age of, I guess, where we are right now and kind of using the tools. How do they, in respect of that, how do they make sure they still stay in demand, basically, or like,
Yeah, and stay relevant. Like,
yeah,
but like I do think like thinking like an engineer is a skill, right? And
yeah,
I don't think that's a skill that's being replaced anytime soon.
no, exactly. I think like, yeah, getting out of the problems of kind of ticket taking and kind of getting into the problems of, you know, tough distributed systems challenges, dealing with things at scale, getting involved in more areas of the stack than you would because you've got the capacity or time or whatever to do that. And um, yeah, I guess my advice would be like spend the time doing the things that the AI tools just can't do, working on those problems, honing those skills, because there's still plenty of problems that are just new and challenging, and look at open source stuff that's kind of on the edge of what's going on. um, and yeah, I think that's where people will add the most value. I think like over the next few years will be, it's I feel like engineering is, seeing problems before they're there as well, right? And having like, it's something that AI can't really do. And as an engineer, that's where you can really add a ton of value, save a company a ton of money, or plan ahead really for the future. So yeah, that's a kind of a wishy-washy answer from me,
No, that's
but
okay. I have something to add, like from my experience at least.
mm,
So I like recently just like made kind of like a fun app for a friend, right? And it was very simple. Like the basics of it are web scraping, and it was TypeScript. But I'm not by any means a TypeScript developer. Like it's been years since I actually was like in a code base writing anything like, you know, with like Vite or any of those things. Like that's not me. I'm not a front end developer.
yeah,
But like one thing I can read TypeScript, I can read JavaScript, I can read all this code, and I know like whether it's structured well or not.
yeah,
But like so I wrote this app, and I kind of vibe coded it. I assisted, like I made AI write the code and I reviewed it all. But one thing I will say is I would not have been able to structure the project well or any of that without like my experience, like because I had to
yeah.
like guide it. I had to tell it how I wanted the project structured. I had to tell it to create specific services that I wanted to use and reuse, and like how I wanted to structure the whole project. So I felt like I was like kind of like the pilot
Yeah,
of a ship,
yeah,
and you still have to keep everything organized. And without like, engineering experience, if I just like let it build this thing, it would have put thousands and thousands of lines of code in one file. It might kind of work, but you'd never be able to debug it or make it work well. And so like I think like approaching problems from like organizing and like creating a plan of attack to use AI to create things is like super beneficial, but I don't think you can do it without having engineering experience.
yeah. Exactly. It's like, if maybe we should get me to try and vibe code something once a month, and the day that I can, we all go, okay, let's forget about engineering,
Like
because
crap.
yeah, because
Greg is hiring himself now.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's my point though. It's like it's a tool again, and it's like, you know, there's AI, resume matching software out there. There's,
Yeah.
AI job finding software out there, but it doesn't mean that someone could come in and do my job for a week, right? The human has to do the bits in between
Right.
with experience, with their knowledge that they've gained, and I think what it really does is, yeah, it frees up your time to really steer the ship. Like you're spending less time cleaning the windows of the ship, and you're actually spending
Mm,
more time doing the important stuff, and navigating where that ship's going. So I think that's a good analogy, and I think
Yeah.
there's a ton of that's actually really where the value is. I used to get common thing that people would say to me is, I don't want to be, dealing with some legacy systems and just taking tickets and kind of like keeping the status quo. I want to be building. I want to be, architecting. I want to be looking ahead to the future and working on new things. And I think, like, at the moment, it seems like that's where engineers are getting to spend more of their time.
Yeah. Well, it's cool, like, because I could have manually fully built this, right?
Yeah.
This TypeScript project, but the amount of time that it took me to build it, I did it in, maybe 10 hours total instead of a month.
Mm. And like that's why you can see, like, for a startup or something like that's trying to get to show customers, new features regularly and meet certain deadlines. Like that's a game changer for them.
Hmm.
There is a question of what happens when you get to the scale and the demand, and that then is that work. How does it stand up at that point? But
I have an interesting perspective, and I'd like to know your take on it, because I don't like, you won't like it, because it like kind of goes against, like, you're a recruiter, you find talent for companies, right? And I've kind of had this like feeling where, like, everyone is scared of, where AI is going. Maybe not scared, but it's in the back of our minds, like, will it replace us at some point? And like, I've kind of had taken this take on, this is our time. Like, look, I built an app by myself, prompting, like, I guided the ship, right? But it's my perspective is build the products and be a product owner right now. So like, if our jobs do get replaced, you have products that you can sell.
mm.
And like, I'm curious, like, if you think, if that's like, am I extremely being doom and gloom there? Like, create your own companies and your own small teams and have a product, or ride the wave and see where it goes, because it's usually never as bad as we think it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of quite an all encompassing kind of, it's a scary thing to kind of think about, I guess. But so you're saying there'll be less kind of bigger companies, and there'll be more kind of individuals with their own
Yeah.
products, and they kind of sell those. Yeah, I mean, like, to a certain extent, but then it's, if you think of what it goes in to make companies profitable today, you've got like the top engineering talent, you've got the top marketing talent, you've got the top finance talent. Like, we've got a ways to go before AI can.
Well, but also, if you're in a really niche market, right, and you're just building a very useful tool that people will be like, this is worth $30 a month to me.
Mm.
Like, being like a 1 or 2 man team, you can make a decent living off that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a fair point, but then you would probably at some point need
To
to
grow.
find. Well, yeah, you want to, how do you let people know about this product in a very crowded marketplace? How do you keep them, buying the product or whatever it is? And how do you kind of adapt with the market and the needs and changes of that product? Like, you could build a great product right now, you could get, everyone could be using it for a month, and then something happens, something changes, and
Well, but then here's the plus side of that, right? If we get all these guys building their own products in Elixir, and then they blow up, that's another big company now written in Elixir, and we need more Elixir devs.
Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that. If they're using me to hire, yeah, I'll take that.
Perfect. All right, we have a good question from Andrew. Let me find it. Not to pull you guys off the AI topic again. No, we're good. I think we've expelled that. Um, I'm interested in hearing Greg's thoughts on the ideal resume the hiring managers he works with are looking for. Because from my perspective, I've had a lot of interactions with recruiters where I feel like skill set wise, I could easily do the role, but I never hear back and I never know if it's the resume or what it could be.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a good point. I think, and this is a bit of a shirking the question slightly. Like every time, hiring still is a very human thing, right? I know it's like I feel like in this, in 2025, like we think we kind of be past that, and it is kind of keywords and so it still isn't. Like every manager has a different ideal. It might be based on the fact that they hired an engineer 5 years ago who was a certain, had a certain background, and it resonates with them to have someone else, and that person was excellent. Like we all have those kind of biases almost, and because we're all human. But I think like as a general rule, like most managers are looking for good tenure, and I know it's not always possible with layoffs and whatnot, but I think a good tenures at companies, it's still a very important thing. They want someone who's going to build for the future. And I think showing that, they've been at somewhere for 2 or 3 years, they've seen their technical decisions in 2019 pay off in 2022. So there's something to be said for that. I think the companies are always going to want to match up with obviously the tech stack. I think like one thing I've noticed that a mistake people may make is they actually list like every tech skill, that they've ever touched and don't really know that well.
I used to
And
do that.
yeah, and it's like what everyone told you to do is to like put it in white writing on the resume so it comes up through the AI filters. Not a good idea. Like I don't think that's a good idea at all. Like know your skill set super specifically, and back yourself on like a small tech stack that you've had recent experience with, you've done some great work in, you've had success in it, even commercially with the business, and they've had success as a result. And yeah, I think the temptation is when the market's rougher is to go
Wider.
go broader. And I think my advice is always to be niche further in. Like,
No.
When the market was better, like me just recruiting in Elixir was enough to kind of get me in most doors. And then as times are tougher, I got to add a bit more value. Like I can find you Elixir developers locally. I can find you Elixir developers who've done open source projects with AI. I can find you Elixir developers who've worked on React.js front ends. There's you've got to kind of lean into what you are and kind of where your strengths are. And I think like for me, I get like applications come through, and it's just a resume, and like and people will say I could do this. Like in the market right now, I've got to take your resume and kind of sell it to the manager and kind of get you that first interview, and you've almost got to kind of be selling the whole way through and be like, look, I've done this X at Y company, I've done this there, and I've actually been in this domain before. I'm a really good fit. Like we should set up a chat for these reasons. And like I appreciate that's kind of tiresome and requires a bit of labor up front, but I promise you, like with people like myself, that goes a really long way. Like I love it when a candidate comes to me and says, this is what I've done, this is what I want to do, and this is how I'm going to get to what I want to do, because I'm going to work on this in my free time. I've already got this experience, but I'm adding this to it. I want to connect with companies who do this, like, and like that specific. And then I'm like, great, there's probably only, 4 or 5 companies in the US that do that. But if I get you an interview, you're going to knock that manager's socks off, So yeah, I know that's like maybe not particularly helpful, but yeah, that's kind of the way I
mean, like I remember, so like when I made a decision, I only wanted to work in Elixir. It was hard, like, because one, I only worked with Elixir on personal projects, like my own bootstrapped companies. And so my experience was, 3 years working on a project, but it was my own project. So it's like really hard to prove that you're an engineer, that you know what you're doing. And so I found that to be a little difficult. And then like starting my YouTube channel and this podcast became very helpful because it made me a little more like just relevant in the community. And that was helpful. But like niching down was the scary part, because it's like, all right, I'm going to drop iOS developer off my resume. I'm going to drop Node.js developer off my resume. And I dropped all these things off, and I was just like, here, these are the Elixir projects that I've worked on.
100%. Like, yeah, and I remember like when we first spoke, I think like it was that kind of situation. And I think like just honing in and it's like it just yeah it's scary. You're right because you're limiting your pool, but really you're not you're focusing on your target market. Like
Yeah.
that's where you want to work at the end of the day. And let's be honest, there's no point getting interviews really if you're not going to take the job and you're not going to be happy there and you're not going to stay there for a while. Like the goal is to get in somewhere you're going to be for the long term and really enjoy the work. Which and the downside to that is yes, it takes a little longer. The search process takes a little longer, but I think it has better kind of long term results.
Yeah, I agree. Man, dude, the last like couple podcast live streams, the chat is just so good. I love how like interactive it's becoming. So Paulie goes, when I've interviewed and asked for feedback, if it doesn't work out, I straight up get ghosted. Now, I think this is a very like negative association with recruiters.
Mhm.
And like what do you do if you get ghosted by a recruiter that was like gun ho to get you in the door, but then you never get feedback or hear back from them? Like, do you just move on? Do you just take the L?
I think like any recruiter, like if I'm working on a role and a candidate I've submitted gets rejected, like for whatever reason, like it's more honestly, it's more so in my interest to find out why they got rejected than it is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? For even the engineer, because I'm going to try and find someone else for that role, and so any recruiter worth their salt, like an agency recruiter, will be pushing the client for feedback as to why. And if they have it, there's no reason they shouldn't kind of pass that on, like at all. Like, I think, it can be difficult for recruiters sometimes because sometimes I can give someone some feedback and then there's a real case of shooting the messenger, and it's like, trust me, I would have rather you got the job too.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much I can kind of do at this point
Dude,
to.
painful feedback's the best kind of feedback though. Like if you
No,
just
I
like
agree. I
if you
agree,
totally
but
shit the bed on an interview, you want to know.
yeah. And I think like I always like definitely try to like. There's obviously times that I think things slip the net, and if someone doesn't follow up with me, if they do follow up with me, I'll follow up again with a client to get more feedback. At CV submittal stage, like at the moment, you're rarely going to get feedback from a client unless
Right,
it's
because you don't know. Like you're just not being
yeah,
select.
it's
That's the hard part. Like, how do you make your resume stand out in that initial
yeah,
phase? Like, if you get your foot in the door and you make it, like, I find if you have that initial call, they're just making sure you're a good fit and they like you. It's
yeah,
usually like
yeah,
low, very low level, not a technical person talking to you, but they're like, yeah, we like this guy. He seems like a good fit. And then if you crush that technical call, the next call, you probably have it.
I have like a 1 to 1.01 first interview to second interview ratio. Like everyone I'm getting for first interview gets to the second interview for
Mm-hmm.
sure. The second interview then is usually the technical portion, which is where I'm sure the feedback is more important. If because if you're out on the first interview, it seems a little personal sometimes, I guess. But the second one is definitely like a technical assessment, and that's where I understand that someone needs some feedback. But yeah, I mean, all I can say is from my side, like any recruiter worth their salt will be getting that feedback. And it's no water off like my back to share that with a candidate, and I obviously endeavor to do so to help them where I can. And in a lot of cases, particularly if it's like a intensive interview, I'll have a call with the client, and especially if it's like a final, I'll have a call with the client. Okay, what went wrong, and then I'll have a call with the candidate, and we'll talk through it. And if they feel like any of it's unfair, I'll often push back. And a lot of like I've done many placements by pushing back. It's just important not to. I guess it's very hard to not to take these things personally, right? But there's always it might just be that they've not seen something, or that the call got cut off after an hour because that was the time allowed and you didn't get a chance to explain something fully. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and like that's what I'm trying to avoid most of the time. But sometimes it's just not the right fit, and that can be hard because that's worse if it's just like we don't think they'd be that happy here, and it's just like, well, what does that mean? Like, why don't you think? And there's a lot of legwork that goes into it.
I remember like a couple of years ago, I had an interview at a company, and for whatever reason, it was like multiple technical interviews in a row. Kind of like I was like meeting with every engineer of the team. It was like it was very stressful, but everything was going pretty well with all the excuse me, all the engineers. And then my last one was like an architecture talk with the CTO, and I just like we nothing like poorly was said between us. We just,
Yeah.
I could just tell he didn't like me. Like
Yeah.
our personalities did not mesh. And immediately after that call, I was like, yeah, that's done.
Yeah.
He's gonna
Yeah.
turn me down after that. It was just like, it was so weird. The vibes were like our frequencies were so off. But like at the end of the day, I wouldn't want to work with someone that I feel that way
No.
with, you know?
No. The amount of times I say to people, I say like, look, it's probably a bullet dodge like most of the time because you wouldn't be happy in that culture, in that environment. Like that's how they work. That's okay. That doesn't work out sometimes. It's better than joining and getting 3 months in and being like, oh, I got to look again. Like you'd rather keep looking in that current sprint.
Yeah, exactly. I think like a good perspective to take too is don't put all the power in the person hiring you's hands too. Like you're an asset that they need, right? They need your skill set. So like you have to kind of put a little bit of power in your shoes so you don't let like an interview just give you an ulcer, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I love it when I get feedback after interview and they're like, "Well, I actually did most of the questions myself and like managed to kind of flip it around a bit and say like, well, what do you need to be delivered? What do those kind of questions? What's your goal and for me to do in the first 3 months? What's your, what could I
Hmm.
achieve in the first 6 months that would be great for the team?" Asking those kind of questions allows you to then say, "Can I actually do what they need me to do?" And if you can, then it's quite an easy sell back. And at that point,
Yeah.
yeah, if you still get rejected, it's probably personal. But
Yeah. Well, dude, sometimes people just don't like you and that's okay.
yeah,
Like, you know
yeah,
how many people out there probably just don't like my face? And that
oh yeah,
happens. So
yeah,
like if I don't get a job because of that, you don't want to work with them anyways.
yeah. Mine's more my voice. I think I'm more on the phone, so it's the voice they hate.
Ah, this guy.
Mm. I know
uh,
that Yorkshire accent. Yeah,
I don't know. There are a lot of things go into it. And yeah, you kind of you got to look out for yourself too.
yeah, for
Like
sure.
it sucks. Like I get when you're like on the job hunt, you feel like very desperate, but at the same time, like you, like this is your career, right? So you want to also make the right choice for
Yeah,
what fits you. If it doesn't
yeah,
feel right, you don't want to do it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And yeah, I like this. Sometimes like everything can check out on paper as well and you just get through the process and like the amount of times like I've been doing this a long time and I still can't there's placements that I don't think have a chance of going being a deal and they are and then I
Mm.
have placements where I'm like this is a dead cert like lines up perfectly industry background and then something gets in the way like for whatever reason so I think like I think niche down, know your worth, know where you really add value from the get go. If they don't have a gap there for you to add that value, then move on and find someone who does. It's like me when
Hmm.
I'm going for companies. If they're having a great time hiring Elixir engineers and it's really easy for them and they've got a really smooth process, it's all going really well. Cool, great. Like you're not my client. My clients are the
Hmm.
people who are struggling to get the right talent and yeah, I think it's the same thing. You've got to kind of get a little comfortable with a bit of rejection as well.
So sometimes I wish we could I want to figure this out. Like if someone has a really good question, I want to like bring them on live. Be like, hey, you want to jump on and ask? Like treat it like old school radio where people could phone in.
Yeah, that would be cool. A
But
call in show.
Owen, can you dive into what you mean by if you can use benchmarking and debugging in the interviewing process, you will probably stand out? Like what do you mean exactly by that? Because I think I kind of get it, but maybe I'm missing something.
What's that? Benchmarking and debugging in the interview. Is that did I say that?
I don't think you said that. I think it's like a suggestion on Owen's side. But
Could you
anyways,
repeat? Could you repeat the question?
yeah, if you can use benchmarking and debugging in the interviewing process, you will probably stand out.
Yeah, I guess that's more. Yeah, more of a comment that like, yeah, if you can, do those. Yeah, I think.
I feel like there is a good conversation there, and I want to touch on it more, but I want to know what he means a little more. That's why I was like, if we could just let him phone in right now,
Yeah, and get the
be
back and
awesome.
forth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, yeah. Now I derailed us. I guess like with this going, um, like what like future outlook now? Like, do you see? Nah, I don't want to talk about AI anymore. But what's your like 2025 prediction for Elixir job market?
Yeah, I think for the end of this year, like it's certain sectors that are kind of buzzing where there's kind of a lot more money flowing right now. Um, and I think it'll kind of remain spotty till the end of the year. But again, like adoption is kind of like if you think of it in terms of rather than how many Elixir jobs are, if you track how many Elixir jobs are posted, yes, they've gone down like considerably in the last 2 years. But I think there's an uptick there, and I think if you look at Elixir demand compared to other languages in terms of market share, I actually think Elixir's gained some market share coming out of this. I
Yeah,
feel
that's
like
awesome.
Scala and languages like that have kind of gone away for quite a considerable amount, from what I can see. There's a time where I kind of recruited across all functional programming and still touch on a few different functional programming languages, and Elixir has just been the one that's remained commercially the most kind of successful and growing throughout. And the fact it's survived kind of honestly from like the big tech downturn is like testament, I think, to what it can do for companies and what engineers can do with it. So I'm pretty optimistic. Like I'm still feeling pretty good about the end of this year. I don't expect it to explode in terms of demand before the end of the year, but I think we'll get back to a good equilibrium. Yeah, pretty soon, hopefully.
Yeah, no, that's cool to hear. Just the persistence of Elixir, and like I feel like when you hear about like BBC and all these like success stories, like Discord and all these things, it's very promising because then you realize that like these giant companies they can rely on like that the Beam VM, the Erlang backbone, and you're
Yeah.
actually seeing them in production doing the heavy lifting that they promised to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what's one thing that like I definitely want to do more of. I mean, I get excited when I see a new company, but I think like it's also super exciting when you see a list of kind of unicorns, or there's a lot of companies that people just don't know are backed by Elixir, like
Yeah.
and it's like that's where the market needs a little bit of work, or the ecosystem needs a bit of work, is publicizing it, because there's some great companies that are super profitable, doing super cool things, through Elixir, and Elixir engineers themselves don't know about it. So it's like there's a lot of asymmetric information in the market still.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like I'm always excited when I hear about a company that's using Elixir and I never realized it. And I feel like I'm also in a position where I kind of hear about it more often than other people, and it's very cool. And like Utah specifically is a very like
Yeah,
big Elixir company hub, and I
yeah,
don't know why, but it's really cool to me.
yeah. I think yeah, it definitely is. It's kind of, it's quite random. I think like the rest of it's definitely pulled around kind of the coasts, and then but yeah, I think I'm yeah, like I said, I'm pretty confident about what the next year, 2 years looks like. And I think the amount of growth that a company can have with a small team of Elixir engineers is probably what's keeping it going at the moment as well. And like as teams lean down, that they can have 3 or 4 Elixir engineers and more productive than
You know what I think you need to do, and I don't know if you've already done this, but you should write like a blog post or some sort of resource on like resume or CV um, building. Like, what are the do's and don'ts? And I feel because I feel like you see like a lot of resumes go through your hands.
Yeah, I've probably seen more Elixir developer resumes than anyone on the planet. I would anticipate.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think it's not a bad idea really to kind of get something out there, a bit of material out there. I tell you what though, I do love still like I love unique resumes and kind of like people who
yeah,
just
yeah.
and honestly, what's more important than the resume to me, and maybe it's because I'm in sales that I appreciate it so much, but when someone sees a role, they message me and say, resume attached, but this is why I'm a good fit. Because it's impossible to put everything on your resume that's gonna kind of resonate
Right.
with the right people. And if you did, it'd be too wordy. So it's like stick to the basics on the resume is my advice. Stick to the tech
Yeah.
stack. Don't list every skill you've ever
I
dabbled with.
found it like the simplest, like in the last, like obviously like 1 page resume, don't go over it. And then
Yeah.
like if you want to hit on specific skills, do you do that in the cover letter and make sure it's like more aimed at the exact role that you want, right?
Yeah, exactly. And look, with like, there's no harm in using ChatGPT or something whilst you're doing it, or some AI tool to help
Just don't
tailor it.
leave the response prompt in there, you know?
Yeah, yeah. There's a few giveaways that can give you away, but I mean, like, you can do a draft with it, to save yourself some
Yeah.
time. But I think there's nothing more powerful than when someone says this really, this job and what this describes really reminds me of what I've done here or what I'm really interested in doing. Um, and like, if I get sold to like that, I'm like, yeah, like I believe it. Let's go, kind of thing. Let's hop on a call, and
Yeah.
then you sound like the right person.
Yeah. Any advice to developers in the job market, Elixir developers? What's the best way to like reach out to you, and how do they know what jobs you're like hiring for
So
or
yeah, so
placing for?
I have a mailing list of kind of like folks I've spoken to where I'll advertise my roles kind of once a month. My LinkedIn, I tend to post at least once a week on there, either with some news from the Elixir kind of market or my roles themselves and a brief overview of them. Similarly, you can follow me on X, and I post quite regularly there. I also, yeah, set up the a jobs channel in Slack about 4 5 years ago now. So I'll post my US specific roles in there, but best way to get in touch.
Where's the jobs channel in
That's
the
the
Elixir
remote.
Slack?
I set up the remote US one. So there's the jobs main one, and there's a remote US jobs
Oh,
channel.
okay, cool.
So that's just for US specific stuff.
And that's the
But
Elixir Slack, Elixir Lang
yeah, in the
Slack.
Elixir
Okay,
Slack. Yeah. It's
gotcha.
just a channel
Cool.
within there. But yeah, best way to do is email me. Honestly, email, LinkedIn, drop me a note. Like I say, I might not have something off the bat. My value is kind of over time lining up, exactly what you're looking for and kind of where your skills are, and waiting for the opportune moment. There's people I've spoken to for 4 or 5 years, never placed them, had a few interviews potentially with different clients, but there's not been the right thing, and that's kind of how I work. I'm not trying to
So guys,
fix
just be nice to Greg. It might work out.
understand me as well. Like, yeah, I
Yeah.
do, and feel free to ping me twice if I'm, not responsive for a day or so.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Final thoughts for Elixir developers worried about their career prospects moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that I always think if you're worrying about it shows you care. Like, that's the first point. And if you're worrying about it, you care about what you do. So you care about, adding value where you can. So I think really hone in on where you add value. There's a million things that you feel like you're probably trying to keep on top of, and I think that's difficult in the community. But keep engaged with it. Try and stay current. and kind of get to know your niche a bit within the niche, and what you've done before, and kind of what you want to do in the future, and kind of build your resume for 2 or 3 years. But look, I mean, I think, like I said, I should be. I'm not overly worried about the recruitment market with AI. I think the engineers in Elixir definitely shouldn't be yet.
I think it's a shift. That's all it is, right?
Yeah.
It's like the social media or the 90s.com. It's just a new shift in tech.
But again, like what happened with like social media, people started missing face-to-face interactions more. People start doing meetups. What's going to happen like with AI? Everyone gets sick of AI.
We're going to get sick of not using our brains.
Yeah, exactly.
So one question, I'll just let you answer it. Do you only work with US-based companies?
Yes, I focus on US-based companies, but I do support. We have an office in the UK as well, so we do support Europe and Germany as well. So we do some work over there, but the 99% of the work we do in Elixir is with US-based companies, but there's still some US-based companies that hire globally. So yeah, it's kind of, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, man. It's always a treat having you on, and everyone that listened, thank you for being so active in the chat. I love that because it's I like the interactive. It makes the live stream a lot more fun. Before we sign off, do you have any last words?
No, I think thanks for having me on again. It's a pleasure again. Hopefully we'll do it in another 6 months, and things will be even better, or we'll get a transcript and see where we were wrong and where we were right on a few aspects.
We should actually review our show notes and then like do it on a more regular basis. I like every like 2 quarters or so, and see where we're at.
See how we forecast. We'll probably end up with egg on our face, but it's always great to be on here, and I hope to hear from a few people from email, LinkedIn, and to either support you in your search, and even if I can't direct you to a job, I'm happy to have a chat and tell you kind of one-on-one what I think.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again, man. And everyone else, have a good weekend.
Testing.